with some juicy news. Before I begin, let me say I'm not a financial advisor. Anything you see or hear in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Remember to do your own research and consult with a qualified professional before making investment decisions. Okay, taking a look at the crypto market cap, it is coming in at 1.23 trillion and is up 1.3%. Bitcoin is coming in at number one at 29,428. Ethereum is coming in at number two at 1,877. My beloved XRP is coming in at number 4 at 71 cents. Taking a look at crypto bubbles, it looks like it's mostly green, and looks like the two top gainers is Synthetics and XDC, up 13.1 and 12.5 respectively, and the biggest loser looks like it's Tile, down 4.6%. Taking a look at the Fear and Greed Index, it's coming in at neutral at 51. Shout out to Cryptic Poet, he puts out just in, digital assets that are not inherently securities may be offered as a part of an investment contract, but that does not make them necessarily securities. And that is a quote from Chairman McHenry. I'm going to play this quick video.
We're taking similar actions today by bringing these relatively new innovations into the regulatory perimeter. Our comprehensive digital asset market structure bill recognizes a key issue. Digital assets that are not inherently securities may be offered as a part of an investment contract, but that does not make them necessarily securities. To clarify how the Supreme Court's Howey test applies to digital assets, our bill focuses on two key issues: decentralization and functionality. That is the crux of the Fit for the 21st Century Act, the pairing of those two factors.
Nice. We are finally making progress in Washington. Okay, moving on. This is the Financial Services GOP Financial Committee. They put this thing out. It says, March Watch. Rep. Richie Torres champions FIT 21 and underscores the inability of existing securities law to provide clarity for digital assets. It is past time to change the status quo and fill the glaring gap in consumer protection present in the digital asset ecosystem. Let me play this video.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just offer a few thoughts. There are profound philosophical differences on the subject of crypto, and there's almost no point in relitigating those differences because it's been extensively debated here today. But I find myself unpersuaded by the notion that the status quo is working. You know, a status quo that gave us the largest crypto Ponzi scheme in history is not working. It's by definition failing. My assessment is that the status quo is dangerously deregulated and requires regulation. Albert Einstein said, if we do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. And the time has come for us to break the cycle of insanity that governs the application of securities law to digital assets. Now, there's a difference between securities law as we as individuals might think it ought to be interpreted and securities law as it has been interpreted by the courts. And the Southern District of New York has held that securities law protects institutional investors in ICOs, but fails to protect retail customers on exchanges. The SEC could, in theory, appeal, but an appeal would take years. So regardless of one's personal view on securities law, we have a status quo in which institutional investors are protected, but everyday average Americans are left exposed. And the choice before the committee in the world as it is whether we should maintain that status quo or change it to fill the gap in investor and consumer protection for everyday Americans. And I believe we should change it. Now, there are those who argue that there's no need for Congress to act, that we should leave it to the courts and the regulators to figure out the application of securities law to digital assets. One of my frustrations is that Congress is often the most powerful institution. You know, we as Democrats argue that we've ceded far too much authority to the courts, particularly the Supreme Court. Republicans often argue that Congress has ceded too much authority to regulators. We can reclaim as our authority as a legislature by actually legislating. And we should legislate with respect to digital assets. Now, there's a concern that the legislation would circumvent the Securities and Exchange Commission. That is not my reading. I read the bill to codify the SEC as a regulator of digital assets, right? The bill essentially holds that a digital asset is presumptively subject to the jurisdiction of the SEC until it is shown to be sufficiently decentralized to constitute a commodity. That's not a circumvention of the SEC. That's a codification of the SEC's authority to regulate digital assets. You know, I heard a concern earlier that a corporation like Apple can tokenize stock. A stock is inherently a security, regardless of whether you tokenize it. In fact, the legislation says the term digital asset does not include any note, stock, treasury, stock, security, future, or the traditional securities. So the legislation does not apply to traditional securities. There's a difference between a security in itself and a digital asset that's offered as part of an investment contract, which is a security. There's concern about the safe harbor. My understanding is that the safe harbor offers no protection to any bad actor who perpetrates fraud or market manipulation or misappropriation of funds. Right? A bad actor like FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried would not have benefited from the safe harbor contemplated in the legislation. And there are legitimate concerns about regulation by enforcement. The SEC has not issued a single rule clarifying the application of securities law to digital assets. There's been no written guidance. We've heard mixed messaging not only between the CFTC and the SEC, but within the SEC itself. The CFTC tells us that Ether's a commodity. The SEC has said that it's a security. Mr. Gensler first said that Ether's too decentralized to be a security. Then he said it was a security, and then under questioning from Chair McHenry, he said that it depends. I mean, if you consider that regulatory clarity, then you live in a different planet from me. I am confused by the mixed messaging, by the lack of rules and guidance that have been provided by the agency. And this legislation is far from perfect, but it represents a good faith attempt to bring clarity to an area where none exists. And I associate myself with the comments of Congressman Himes and Congressman Nickel, and I will support the legislation. I will not let the enemy, the perfect be the enemy of the good.
I have only one statement. Why can't every Democrat think like this, Richie Torres? Because things would be a lot better if all the Democrats got on board. Okay, moving on. This is a tweet from Tom Emmer. He writes, "My nonpartisan bill, the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, is simple but very important. Today's markup is a critical first step towards providing regulatory certainty that benefits Americans and fosters innovation right here at home." Okay, moving on. This is a tweet from the Financial Services Committee. Rep. Wiley Nickel speaks in support of the FIT 21. Watch his remarks calling out the SEC's regulation by enforcement regime and the dangers of pushing blockchain innovation overseas. Let me play this video.
For the 21st Century Act, the bill lays out clear rules of the road to protect consumers, promote innovation, and advance U.S. national security. And we've come a long way on this bill, and I'm thankful to Chairs McHenry, Chair Hill, for working with me and my staff to secure support in a bipartisan way and the best possible legislative project. This literally is hundreds of hours of work at the staff level, at our level. We've met over and over, and my concerns have repeatedly been addressed on this bill and the stablecoin bill that we will see tomorrow. Much like the dawn of the internet, this new technology feels like uncharted territory with immense possibilities. And we're responsible for ushering in this new era in a way that harnesses innovation and ensures consumer protection. Digital assets and blockchain technology have the potential to revolutionize our society. They can grow the economy, foster collaboration, enhance transparency, reduce transaction costs, and increase efficiency. If we fail to act, the SEC's regulation by enforcement will push this industry overseas to places like the Bahamas, where Americans don't have any protections. Listen, Mr. Chairman, I firmly believe in the SEC's mission to protect investors. But for this to be effective, Congress needs to pass legislation with a clear regulatory framework. The last thing we need is another situation like FTX, and my goal has been to ensure that this bill can protect my constituents, and I'm certain it'll do just that. We can't expect securities laws written almost 100 years ago to work seamlessly with this new technology. And listen, whether you love crypto or you hate crypto, you should support regulations for the industry. The status quo just isn't working, and we can't wait until the next crisis to take action. I came to Congress to get things done. The best policies start at the center, not the far left or the far right. This bill is an example of the bipartisanship that my constituents expect from Congress, and I urge my colleagues to support the passage of the bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
Nice. Love it to see that. Okay, here we have another one from the Financial Services Committee. It's a must-watch. Rep. French Hill shuts down misleading claims about the FIT 21. Let me play the video.
Ms. Beatty says there are many more questions about this bill and implies they're not answered. But I think of many of the questions we've talked about for the last 2 hours, there are answers to each of those points, and they're in the bill. For example, my friend from New York, Mr. Torres, noted you cannot tokenize a security in this bill. It's strictly prohibited. Page 10, it's not a digital asset. The assertion by Mr. Sherman to that point is not accurate. There's a concern that somehow we're going to facilitate weaker consumer or investor protections. That's absolutely to the contrary, and some of those have centered around this issue of provisional registration authority. So a provisional registration authority creates safe harbors from certain actions, but people are able to be prosecuted. No cases against people are stayed by a provisional authority. That's not correct at all. And the fact that the SEC has won almost 130 cases, not true. They settled 130 cases. And they're confusing and disjointed, and we saw the most recent example of that in the Torres decision in XRP, the Ripple case last week. That's why we need to act in this Congress, to bring clarity. And we are not gutting of the SEC. We're enhancing the SEC. We're directing the SEC in a bright line way what their mission is. And as noted by the gentleman from New York, we are showing then how it is governed by the securities regime. And if it's not a security, it's governed by the commodities regime. Now, Mr. Kasten says that this industry is covered with wash trades. They're prohibited in this bill. Broker-dealers in the commodity space are registered with the Managed Fund Association. Brokers and dealers in this space are registered with FINRA. They have rules of procedure. They have high standards in this bill that absolutely causes that not to be the case. And funding, we've heard a lot about funding today. I know Mr. Scott, when he goes to the markup on this bill tomorrow in the House Agriculture Committee, he'll get to vote for this bill, for Title IV of this bill in the Ag Committee that funds with mandatory spending the funding for the Commodities Future Trading Commission. And to the assertion that somehow we've stopped fees that Mr. Lynch said, that's not true on page 114. We do not do that. There is funding, and Republicans support adequate funding based on the bills authorized by this committee and the Ag Committee as to what they will actually do. We'd be happy to do that. But this is an authorizing committee, not an appropriating committee. So, Mr. Chairman, I think you've done good work working through these issues. I think they're well drafted in here. We've had tremendous comments and help from people off the Hill and on the Hill. And I have to thank my friend Mr. Himes. He and I spent a good part of our career in the private sector in finance. We've looked at this bill extensively, and this bill is a bill that makes the system better. Investors are protected. We don't have a race to the bottom. We have a race to the top. And I yield back to Mr. Lukemire. Thank you.
Yes, looking good. Here we have Eleanor Tourette. She put out GOP Majority Whip Darren Soto's crypto bill. The Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act has just passed out of the Financial Committee. Here we have Ron Hammond. He writes the first crypto regulatory framework bill just passed. Total count 35 yes, all Republicans. The Democrats include Himes, Gottheimer, Horsford, Torres, Nickel, and Peterson. There were 15 no's. See you tomorrow for part 2 at the House Ag GOP. This is history in the making. Okay, Eleanor Tourette, she writes out here, tomorrow the bill will get marked up by the House Ag GOP and the House Ag Dems and will advance to the House floor for a vote if it passes out of the House Agricultural Committee. I can't wait. Hopefully they can get it done. Eleanor Tourette also with this tweet here. Hester Peirce, she put out a tweet, the SEC exhibits hostility toward technology and disclosure in a new rule proposal, and she is there. Eleanor Tourette puts out that the agency's attitude towards technology is hostile, is not neutral, exactly what Hester Peirce said, and she's been saying that for a while. It's nice to see that someone from the commission is calling the commission out. Okay, shout out to Watcher Guru. Just 10 people lining up to have their eyeballs scanned for the OpenAI CEO's WorldCoin. Let me play this. It's a whole lot of people right there. Whole lot of people. And all I can say is, no thanks, not interested in that. Okay, moving on. Shout out to Donnell Dixon. She writes at Stellar.org, we're all about unlocking blockchain's potential. Read the blocks report to see how Stellar's on and off ramps bridge the gap between fiat and digital economies, empowering businesses to solve real world problems. And that is good to see. Another monster in the space. Okay, here we have Kayla Long. Shout out to her. Well, Anton Schutz was right yet again. And a big M&A wave among the smaller banks is incoming. So the bigger banks keep getting bigger and bigger. And that's because Bank of California to buy PacWest in an all-stock merger. PacWest holders to get 65 cents of a share of a Bank of California. Bank of California, a $400 million raise, also includes Centerbridge. Oh, everybody saw that one coming. Okay, here we have the Bitcoin magazine. New billionaire Tim Draper on Fox News. I think that Bitcoin is going through the same curve the internet did. The internet became such an important part of our world. And I think the same thing is going to be true of Bitcoin. And I agree with that, but I also would include all the other altcoins that have a real world use case, doing real world solves. And Bitcoin itself is basically a store of value, and they're all going to succeed, at least for the foreseeable future. The meme/shitcoins, not too much for them. Okay, moving on. Here we have Asaf Givoli. Breaking Bulgaria goes all in on Bitcoin. Government announces purchase of nearly 200,000 Bitcoin worth $6 billion. We believe wholeheartedly in the future of digital assets, said Prime Minister. This massive investment cements Bulgaria's role as a global Bitcoin leader. It is nice to see the space getting bigger and thriving. Okay, moving on. Shout out to Cowboy Crypto. He writes, Ripple acquired Pantera's stake in Bitstamp in May of this year, and Bitstamp was approved by the UK's FCA in June. And there's the UK FCA approved Bitstamp's registration as a crypto asset firm in June 2023. MoonPay, Wintermute Trading, and eToro, among other notable firms that have registered. That is good to see. Again, Cowboy Crypto, he's responding to Blockworks' news. Ripple sets its sights on the UK and Ireland for next expansion of services. And Cowboy Crypto writes, once the exchange has this Irish license, Ripple wants to passport its services across Europe. Nice. Good to see. And here we have Tony Edwards from the Thinking Crypto podcast. Shout out to him. He writes, this is Gary Gensler trying to stop crypto. Let me play the video. That's gotta hurt. That's really gotta hurt. Okay, moving on. Shout out to Michael Branch. He writes Ripple and Palau Mint's very first Palau stablecoin. Palau's digital residency office director reveals the successful minting of Palau's first stablecoin, PSC, in collaboration with Ripple has just begun. A central bank digital currency is on the XRP ledger. Nice. Okay, here we have, shout out to Chad Steinberger. He writes, remember, Atomic Settlement Day was the birth of utility. The new golden era is in front of us. And this is a tweet from Jack the Ripper. He writes, boom, the first domestic CBDC transaction on the XRPL in Palau. Cross-border settlement soon. And here is...
Okay, so
460.
so scan the QR code, and then scan the QR code.
460, 4.6 amounts.
4.60, 68. Okay.
Okay, wait a minute.
Usually this slow.
It's just how quick the network is. 20 cents. And on your side, you see that? You can refresh it. There was 682. And we'll have plus 468. 5. There you go.
Bam, and there you have it. The first central bank digital currency transaction in Palau, and that is good to see. Well, okay, fam, that's going to do it for today's video. If you found this video to be helpful, would you please smash the like and subscribe? I would really appreciate it, and it doesn't cost you anything. Thank you much in advance. And the words of Snoop Dogg, keep your mind on your money, and your money on your mind. Peace out, fam.